Welcome to the Busy Latter-day Saint, where righteous desires and living life come together. Here, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints discuss their challenges and successes in studying the Scriptures. I'm your host, Richard Bernard. Before we hear from our guest, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast and leave comments. This will help the podcast in reaching a larger audience. Also, invite your friends to listen. Information on how to reach me and a link to my website are in the show notes. The music for this program is by Marvin Goldstein and used with his permission. And now, today's interview. Well, Ken, welcome to the program. How are you doing this morning?
Doing very well, thank you.
Good. Now, we go back a long ways. When I was driving here, I'm actually in your home. It's great to see you again. When I was driving here, I was thinking we met in 72 or 73.
In Israel?
Yeah, in Israel.
Had to be 74. 74 to 77.
Okay, 74. And you left in 77 and I left in 76. So I was there 4 years, and so you were there
three and we
years.
Crossed paths for 2 of those.
Yes, yeah. And I was amazed. How many children did you have at the time when you came over?
We went over with 7 and 8/9.
Wow. I was amazed that someone would pick up their family and move to Israel. And what were you doing in Israel?
I went over to study Hebrew.
Okay.
Took enough materials and brushes and paint to paint signs. I was a sign painter by profession. And I was painting signs in English, Hebrew, and Arabic.
Oh.
All 3 copies on the same signs. But it was so much work making a living that I dropped school. And I was invited because we had a brand new Volkswagen 9-passenger minibus.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, the branch president said, Ken, would you like to rent your minivan? Because we have, when people come over and want a tour, a family, they have no way to go. So we rent a taxi or a minibus. He said, if you'd like to rent your minibus, and we'll provide you the opportunity to be trained as a tour guide. So I ended up as a tour guide full-time for 3 years.
So you got to know the country quite well.
Very well. If there was a road that I could drive on, I was on it. Then it got to the point where some roads were just, you didn't dare drive even if they were good roads.
Yes. Well, I remember he had me do one tour. He ran into a problem or something, and so I did the tour a bit too when I wasn't working in the orchestra. But so you came over with all those children and to study Hebrew, and then started working. And why did you come back?
I had just received my U.S. citizenship before we went to Israel. And if you were out of the country for more than 3 years, you'd have to start all over again. They would cancel your citizenship.
Well, your English sounds very good. So where did you come from?
Where was I born?
Yeah.
Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, I knew that. Canada, yes. So you're an American citizen. And now tell me about your family. How many children do you have now?
Just barely enough, 11.
11. And you married a wonderful woman?
I did.
Yes. And you're, let's see, 11 children. If memory serves me right, they're pretty well scattered throughout the United States, aren't they?
Idaho Falls, Utah County, Costa Rica, California, and the rest are scattered right here around the state.
Yeah, you're in Utah. And when you got back to the States, what did you do?
That's a very good question. I haven't thought about that. Oh, I moved out to Portland, Oregon to go to work with a brother in a piano business. And he had, between the time I agreed to go there, he had changed his mind about the business. So I went to work for my other brother, Bob. And we all grew up in the sign business. So I took over the sign portion of his business, which he had let just about die. And but I was not very content. I'd been a seminary teacher in Canada for 3 years and taught seminary in American Fork and Pleasant Grove and Orem Junior High, 3 years at Orem Seminary. And when I was at BYU, I worked as a teaching assistant for Daniel H. Ludlow, who was the Dean of College of Religious Instruction. And I used to sit in the very back in case he didn't make it back from his office after that 27-foot widescreen movie showed. And he said, if ever I don't come back, go up and answer questions. And I was a little apprehensive about that since there were about 500 students in the class. Anyway, he always came right in just about within seconds of it being finished. And this one particular day, he never came back. And so when 500 pairs of eyes turned to look back at you, I was sitting in the back row. You go up to the front. I got up to the podium, and Brother Ludlow walked in the door, and I said, Brother Ludlow, and he says, go ahead, Brother Patey. And so a man raised his hand, and I said, what's your question? He asked the question. I'd never have been asked that question. I thought, I'm going to buy a little time here. I said, where is the scriptural reference in the Book of Mormon? So he read it to me. And as he read it, I knew exactly what it meant. And I gave an answer. And I turned the time to Elder Ludlow, and he came up and he said to me, Brother Patey, that's as fine a description of that concept as I've ever heard taught. Well done. Well, to me, that was a perfect example of a statement by Marion G. Romney. He said, I can always tell when I've spoken by the Spirit because I learned something from what I said. And I thought, yes, I know that feeling. That was absolutely a thrill, but it was kind of frightening with 500 pair of eyes.
Yes, I would imagine it would be, but yes, I remember Romney's quote on that. And it happened in your life that you got to witness it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, as time went on, what did you do here in Utah?
I was hired, I can say, to teach seminary, and taught at all those schools, and loved it.
And how many years did you do that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years teaching seminary here in Utah.
Okay.
And I'd already taught 3 years in Canada, early morning seminary. I was principal of the seminary up there.
Very good. Now, your wife and you have a business now. What do you do?
We have a course. It's called Growth Climate: The Anatomy of Relationships. We have a new website, intuitiverelationships.com. We teach people to learn to trust their instincts and their intuitive responses. We also teach people how to profile. The profiling concept was actually born in Israel. I had a tour group in the Negev, just adjacent to the ancient biblical site of Beersheba. And we were in this huge Bedouin tent. It must have been 50 feet long, 25 feet wide, and literally Persian rugs right on the sand. And the Bedouin sheikh was sitting up on a pile of cushions. And we had with us the Ministry of Arab Affairs for the State of Israel from the Knesset. We had a man from Israel who had studied at University of Utah, and he was orchestrated this meeting. And I had a group of 52 tourists, and we were in that tent, and we were being hosted by this Bedouin sheikh. And he didn't speak any English. If he did, he didn't betray that. But the translator was the Minister of Arab Affairs. And the thing that was so interesting for me as a tour guide, which I did for 3 years in Israel, I used to enjoy watching the faces of my tourists as they were exposed to different scenes and experiences, particularly in the old city. And as this Arab sheikh was talking, it was just like a rear screen projection in my mind. I saw a man from London, England, that I knew on my mission, and a man from Wichita, Kansas, a man from Salt Lake City, a man from Lethbridge, Canada, one from Portland, Oregon. And it was just like they were up there for about 5 seconds, the full face of those individuals. And what I recognized then, that despite the fact that they didn't know each other, didn't come from the same places, and I doubt that the Arab sheikh spoke English. He may have done, but never betrayed it if he did. As each of them faces came, I was identifying with the Arab sheikh that he and the other 5 faces which appeared in my mind all had the same emotional output. And I thought, that's very interesting. And I knew enough about the other 4 that I knew what their belief and value system was. Anyway, we created a model called the individual operating system. You can take a person's belief and his values times X, which is the intent of the heart, and that you can then predict their behavior, or their behavior, their tactics, and their emotional fingerprint. So we teach people how to profile others, not in any way that is obtrusive or invasive, but they sense it, and there's enough information on those sheets that they virtually end up memorizing the profiling sheets.
Well, I know what you're talking about because you would have group meetings, and I was called several times to interpret for American Sign Language. You had a deaf sister attending and to interpret.
That's right.
And so I got to sit in these classes and learn these things, and I found it very, very fascinating. Actually, for anybody in Utah, they're excellent classes. They really are. And it was an interesting group that would come. There'd be people who were young and old, and some had had bad relationships, and it was very interesting to hear their feedback as the class proceeded.
Yeah, we have what we call the growth climate code, and it encompasses 5 principles. And we encourage all our people to memorize those 5 principles in their detail. And if they can learn those and apply them, their relationships turn around.
Well, now your wife, Sharon, she went back to school.
Yes, she did at age 56.
At age 56. And what did she study?
Family relations.
Family relations.
Then she ended up as a licensed clinical social worker here in the state of Utah.
Okay. And your degree was in the same thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, child development.
Oh, child development.
Yeah.
Okay. And so from that, you developed this business, and that's what you're doing now.
That's right.
As a young man.
Yes, a young man. It's just 1 month older than 80.
80, okay. Well, it's wonderful. I've always valued our relationship. I know we sent our older daughter, Laura, up here one time to visit with you and the family, and she came back so excited. And
Good.
She even had I can't remember what the word was, but she had some new terminology or words that your children used all the time. It's kind of like, today I hear awesome a lot, from LDS people.
It's kind of awesome, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I told my wife, I said, I hear awesome all the time. So it was something like that. Like, I can't remember what it was, but she came back with some new vocabulary. Well, you've taught seminary, and what is your approach to actually studying the scriptures? What do you do?
Let me give you just a little background. I recall standing over the grate of a furnace which was 2 floors below in our home. I was 3 or 4 years old. And my mother had bathed me, and she was drying me off while I stood on that heater grate with the heat coming up from the basement furnace. And she told me the Joseph Smith story. And then she had me repeat it back. And for as many times as I guess she thought necessary, she would do that same little story and have me repeat it back. When I was 8 years old, my mother was invited to attend a study group with LDS returned lady missionaries in our stake. And she got permission for me to go. And so at age 8, I read the Book of Mormon from one end to the other, studying the Book of Mormon for over a year with all those ladies. Then when I was 13 or 14. I don't know why the bishop's wife geared into me or tuned into me, but she'd come up in the hall. Brother Ken, could you answer a question for me? And it was always a question about relationships, and I thought that was quite interesting. And when she asked me the question, I always knew the answer. And anyway, I'll digress from there and go back to England. I was served as a missionary in England under Marion D. Hanks as a mission president. And the first thing he did was ask us to get a 75-cent copy of the Book of Mormon, you know, those ones with a sort of a maroon cover. And he said, I want you to take a blue pencil. I want you to read it. Don't you stop to ponder. You read through the Book of Mormon, underlining story flow. And if you'll do that, by the time you've been through the whole Book of Mormon, you could give me the whole story of the Book of Mormon in flow and sequence accurately. And when we were done, he said, now, I want you to go through again, and I want you to underline everything that has reference to Christ. And underline all of that. And we were underlining as we read. Anyway, by the time we were done, he said, now I want you to go through again. And he said, I can tell you not to stop and think about it, because you'll have to stop and think about it, because it'll be triggering other parts of the Book of Mormon as you read it. And it was true. I'd be reading along and I'd say, that's like this one. Oh, that references this one. And so I was marking them. When we came back from the Middle East, before we went to the Middle East, I was using a marking system, and I wrote this down for you. These are the subjects, and I added more than Elder Hanks had. Those were the topics, and the colors we used. So if you were to go to my scriptures, for example, and open up the Doctrine and Covenants, Book of Mormon, and start turning pages, if you read anything that was in the color purple that had to do with personal revelation or prayer or promptings of the Spirit, anything to do with Christ was underlined in red. Anything to do with follow the brethren was brown. Anything with Satan, since I figured he was a sneaky coward, but he's not really a coward. He's just a little overly intrusive, in yellow, and we had all those different colors. And you could go through my scriptures and just read by color. And if you turned every page, it got to the purple. It had to do with revelation, Holy Ghost, and prayer. Anyway, so I've made that a process that I've used over the years. And the thing that was fun, by the time I had been doing that process, scriptures that I had marked on another study through came up, and I was making cross-references to all of those different passages.
Well, I remember this. You were using little architectural pins that you could really write real fine with.
Yes.
And you showed that to me in Israel. And so while in Israel, I went and got the same set of pens.
I'll be darned.
I think I had the same 10 colors, but I don't remember you telling me a color was related to a topic. But I started using those pens because you could literally write between the lines. Between the lines.
That's especially if you could read between the lines.
Yes.
Or listen between the lines.
Yes, absolutely. And so I used that for many, many years. I've still got my scriptures from back then, and you'll see that I remember when Daniel Ludlow was in Israel, and he talked about how to study Isaiah.
Yeah.
And so in my chapter of Isaiah, in my hard copy of the scriptures, I've got just fine writing there, because I think he said there were 7 keys to understanding Isaiah. I think there were 7. And so, you're the reason I had those pens.
Yeah. My recollection is there were 3 things you needed to know to understand Isaiah. You need to know the language of the Jews. You need to understand chiasmus, because that was very, very common. And anyway, there were 3 of them.
In history, you need to know the history.
Yeah.
Yeah, the history of it.
So the other thing that I did when I was using those little fine pens whenever I was going through and a story came to mind about an experience of mine or a quote by the brethren, I would make a notation about the story. I ran across a notation about that the other day. When I was teaching seminary at Orem High, I was wanting to help the students get a grasp on the power of prayer and asking the Lord to provide an answer to their query or the thing that was troubling them. And I said, what I want you to do, and this was like on Friday, I said, when you go to bed Sunday night, you select a topic that you'd like to ask in prayer, and you pray about it. And I said, then do the same thing again on Monday night and on Tuesday night. So on Wednesday morning, I said to my class, did anybody have any interesting experience? I'll never forget this boy. He was probably the smallest, shortest, sort of a petite senior. And he said, I chose a topic on Sunday night and I prayed about it. And he said, Brother Patey, you answered that question in class on Monday. He said, on Monday night, I asked another question, and you answered the question Tuesday morning. And he said, the one I prayed about last night, you answered in the lesson today, and I want to thank you for increasing my testimony. So I've got that little notation in my margin. So I would make notation of different experiences, events that tied to real life. And all through my scriptures, you'd find notation to those kinds of things.
Well, now you still have the same set of scriptures you had 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Oh, this is a new set since I came back. I've got the old ones, but these are marked.
Okay. And so since you came back, it's still 30 years or more, that particular copy that you have right there.
This was the set that came out when they first went to this new print and
yes, and when they had the references in there and everything. Yeah. Well, what is your study habits? I know that you've had health problems and things, and what do you? How do you approach the scriptures on a daily basis?
Let me give you first a quotation by Huey Brown. He said, if one wishes to improve his speech and his life, let him read the scriptures with such concentration as to impress upon his memory the best of what he reads. That which we value enough becomes part of us. What we share with others helps others to share their lives. He said, let us never miss an opportunity to cast a lovely thought into the heart of a friend. And I've taken that as a very powerful piece. Now let me add another piece. When I found scriptures like comments from the brethren in conference, I would write down in the margin with those little thin pens the quote. And there's one from section 8 of the Doctrine and Covenants that Harold B. Lee, President Lee said, got to get the start of this correct, he said, I know that our Lord and Master, Jesus Christ, is the head of this church, and that he has daily communication not only to the leaders of the church in high places, but with individual members of the church as they keep the commandments of God. To that I bear my solemn witness. So whenever there's a nice quote like that, I insert them. Now, my eyesight's failing, and at this point, I have no sight in my right eye except peripheral vision on the side. I'm getting a tablet so that I can insert, and you can do it in color on the tablet.
Yes, you can. And
insert a quote, and it just moves the verse apart, and you can put the quote in there. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm getting a new tablet, which is larger than the little one I got, so that I can continue my study and application of and recording quotes of the brethren as it manifests themselves in conference.
Well, that's the reason these tablets are wonderful, because you can increase the size of the print.
That I didn't know.
Yes. In fact, now, are you getting an iPad or are you getting some other type of tablet?
iPad.
Okay. Well, now, you do not know this. My audience knows it, but I wrote a book on this. It was published by Cedar Fort. I'm willing to come over anytime and help you with that and show you how to use it.
I'll accept that offer.
Okay. I'll be more than happy to come here and visit with you. Um, you also don't know, because we haven't talked for a while, I teach a Wednesday class to the senior missionaries for Orem and Provo. And we meet every Wednesday online now. We don't meet physically anymore. It's quite a large class. And I teach how to use these devices that we're using to record right now, how to make the most of them, and how to apply that to missionary work. So I've been doing that for quite a few years now.
That's great.
But anyway, I'm thrilled. I would be more than happy to show you how to do that. And so we'll have to set up a regular time here where I can come over and visit with you.
I accept the offer.
Okay. So when are you getting your pad? Waiting for Christmas, or?
Yeah, probably Christmas.
Okay. All right. Well, once you have it, we'll get some time set up. So right now, with your eyesight and everything, are you listening to the scriptures, or what are you doing?
We listen to the scriptures every night before we go to bed. It's on Sharon's cell phone.
Okay.
And we just take the next one in sequence. We've gone through, we're just finishing the Book of Mormon. We've been through the whole Doctrine and Covenants. Actually, we're on the Doctrine and Covenants. It's section 84 last night. And we listen to that and discuss it. And then we have our family prayer as we go to bed. But that's every night.
And is everyone awake when it's done?
Well, the two of us are awake. And we take turns on who says the prayer.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I pray on odd days and my wife prays on even days.
Okay.
But if there's more odd days at the end of the month, then Sharon will take one more of those odd days, and so we have good trades.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And what about Come Follow Me? Do you do that on Sunday, or?
If you look up there on the top, you can see the all standard work on the size of my scriptures. Can you see them top shelf?
Yeah.
And that little orange one is the Come Follow Me.
Okay.
And we hold sacrament meeting here in our home. Our ward doesn't have us come over anymore. So we go through that every Sunday, and we hold the sacrament meeting here, and we have prayer, and we study and give talks.
Very good. Excellent. Well, our time is about up. I've really enjoyed the time with you. I've always enjoyed being with you. You're always enjoyed
the feeling is mutual, Richard.
But yeah, it's been very profitable to be with you and to share time with you and hear some of the stories I've heard before. But they're always great stories. You have a remarkable memory.
Thank you.
I can't remember yesterday, but you're able to quote these general authorities. You've always had a great mind to remember these things.
Well, and I attribute that business to the marking that Elder Hanks talked about. But he only had us do it in pencil, in blue, and in red for the three topics. But I thought to myself, there's a lot more things that need to be done. If I were to show you my scriptures here, and you were to start through, just leaf through a little bit and see the colors on the pages. That's something you learned from me.
Yep.
Like I say, you could go through and read everything in purple, and you've got all the whole scriptural identification of those subjects on Revelation and prayer.
Very nice.
Anyway, I can't use the little pens anymore because I can't see them.
Right.
But I've not lost my zest for it.
Well, I again thank you for your time, and you don't know this because you've never heard the podcast, but I always ask my guests to bear their testimony at the end. Would you mind doing that?
I'd be happy to. Okay. I really was bearing testimony as I told the story about my experience as a 3- and 4-year-old over the heat register from the gravity-fed furnace, as Mother told the story of the prophet Joseph. I've had enough experiences in my life to really be able to attest to the promptings of the Spirit. Is there time for one more story?
Yes.
We'd gone to bed. It was Friday night. We were living in an apartment building on 1st West and 5th North in Provo. And we'd gone to bed about 9:30. At 5 to 12, I found myself sitting straight up in bed, and Sharon said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "We're supposed to go to Canada." She said, "That'd be nice." She said, "When do you want to do that?" I said, "Right now." And she said, "Really? Couldn't we do it tomorrow or something?" "No, I've got to go now." And within 15 minutes, we had our 2 little girls loaded up and all their stuff and hooked up to a little 4x5 trailer, which I had purchased and repaired. And within 15 minutes, we were on the road to Canada, I-15 straight up. And just before we pulled out, we always pray for our trip that we'd be blessed with safety and warnings. And I had made a commitment way back then to never break the speed limit. So we were traveling and got up into Idaho, and we were heading up what called Monida Pass, as I recall. And we had a brand new Oldsmobile station wagon. Man, that baby was so good. And we were burning up that road, perfect blue sky, light day, no snow, anything. And I was doing 85 miles an hour because Idaho or Montana said speed limit reasonable and prudent. It was right on their signs. And as long as the officer didn't think you were being unreasonable and not prudent, he wouldn't call you over. So anyway, we were about 3/4 of the way up that hill, enjoying the day. And I heard a voice say, "Ken, slow down." Just 3 words. And so I just eased off on the pedal, and we were doing about 55 at the top, 2-lane highway then. And right at the top of the hill, around the car that was coming toward me head on, came a little Volkswagen, right around me. And I had moved over enough, and he burned on through, and I thought, that was pretty good. Got up to Canada, got there early enough that Sharon could go to her old hairdresser, and me to go to my barber. You know, we weren't really prepared for any public appearance. And then we went over to my mother's home, and we stayed there and went to church in her ward, Lethbridge 4th Ward. And I said, let's go over to 6th Ward, which was my sister's ward with her husband, and slipped in and sat in the back row just as the meeting started. Stake Presidency was there. He released the first counselor and second counselor, moved the second counselor up to first, and called as his second counselor my brother-in-law. He was a convert to the church. Anyway, then he allowed all of them, or invited them to bear their testimony, the retiring members and the new ones. And Clark said, more than anyone else, I wanted Ken and Sharon to be here, but I know that money's tight for students. So he said, I just said, if there's any Heavenly Father you could send Ken and Sharon up, I'd like it. And there we sat. So, second half, on the way back from Canada, we were in Idaho, and we were switching from Highway 191 to 91 because the Highway I-15 was linking up in a certain few miles. And the hills were very steep, and there was one place before they hit the area toward the canyon, there was a cutaway, you know, where the sides were steep slopes. And as we entered into that curve, and this was the part so interesting to me, Richard, the same man's voice said, with urgency, Ken, put on your brakes. I didn't hesitate. Number one, you don't put your foot on the brakes hard into a curve. But the car lit, and I thought, Sharon's going to hit the back of the window. She was changing a diaper. And I didn't know what was going to happen to the 2 girls. But we came into that curve, and the car just literally shuddered to a stop about 6 inches from the side of a full adult bull standing broadside in our lane of travel. Now, do I have a testimony, Richard? I do. And I attribute my connector to the scriptures and to testimony, to the markings and notations in my scriptures. I do have a testimony that the Lord loves us, that He protects us, and I wouldn't want to not listen to those impressions as they come.